that Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. We'll be talking about that. I'm sure Jennifer has a thing or three to say about that. The Missouri Senate has passed a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, essentially, using the no abortion providers shall be funded ploy. Of course, they don't do abortions.
So they're actually passing bills in the Senate now.
Yeah.
Wow. What a novel concept.
Of course, they're not doing abortions at Planned Parenthood, so that's getting a lot of pushback from people who value the services that they give other than that in terms of birth control and person exams and STI testing and so forth. So that's an interesting debate that we'll talk about. And then 19 Republicans have voted. I keep coming back to it. 19 Republicans voted to squash the spy powers bill. It's just wild. Now, locally, we have something going on, but tell you who's coming up on the show, 7:08. We're going to be talking with Kim Russell.
6:08.
No, 7:08. We're going to be talking with
I thought you were
Kim.
saying the time.
No, we're going to be talking with Kim Russell, who is
very good. She's
with Independent Women's Forum. And, it's interesting to see in the wake of the phenomenal press that women's basketball got, particularly college women's basketball, with the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. And, of course, their championship game, the team didn't win, but she did fabulously, as we know, throughout the entire season. And that really raised the whole issue throughout the season and throughout the playoffs of, do women belong in men belong in women's sports? Men who wear dresses belong in women's sports? And there's some progress being made there. Kim Russell will be on about that, along with some national organizations fighting back against transgender activities in women's sports. And Aaron Hedlund, then at 8:08, will be here, or be joining us. He's from the Show Me Institute, and he'll be talking about the CPI numbers that were out yesterday. Actually,
terrible.
Yeah, yesterday. They weren't good.
And CPI stands for?
Consumer Price Index.
Thank you. We're working on our acronyms, Jen, because we've been accused by a couple different Wake Up family members of never explaining what acronyms stand for, and they can't quite follow along at home. So we're trying to do better.
I'm sure plenty can, but we should be clear.
It's that continual improvement thing that they have on the wall outside here. So
they put that up there for Randy or for Gary? Who are they putting that up there for?
All of the above.
All right. And John, yes. You're going to get a kick out of this, and I'm gonna blow a little cover here. That's Hannah. She told me something off air that I thought we'd share with the audience.
Oh no.
You know our friend Mayor Ron Fitzwater. You know how he targets 93.9 The Eagle and KWS on-air talent for parking tickets?
Yes, he does.
Producer Hannah was zapped by the maid meters down in Jefferson City. Again.
Rightfully so.
The meter maids. Did I say maid meters? The meter maids.
Maid meters, whatever works.
I have a scofflaw when it comes to parking, and Jeff City needs to make those tickets more expensive before I change my habits there.
I know. I told Randy this morning.
Don't tell him to do that because that might make me change my habit. But when Columbia jacked them up to $15, I started being more mindful of paying my meters.
Is it 15 in Columbia?
I think so.
Wow.
I told Randy, I said, sometimes the threat of the $6 ticket is just worth
it. $6 now? It was like $5 usually. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for those of you who don't know.
If you compare the odds of getting a ticket to how much it costs to pay it, especially if you're running late to a hearing or something.
Well, we were having a fabulous lunch a month or two ago down there, and I ran 5 minutes over, not even 5, just barely, and I'm walking up to the car, Helene and I. And
they'll still be ticketing you.
And I mean, this guy in a yellow vest walking away, and I figured, he's a construction guy, because there was a construction guy. No, that was the meter maid. The meter maid.
The meter maid.
Those darn
I don't have
maids.
coffee this morning.
I don't know if you're supposed to call them meter maids anymore.
Yeah. Oh,
that's never stopped
parking
him before.
Enforcement officers, I think is
the so that would make them PEOs?
That would be it.
I think that's very close to PIAs.
PDQs.
Just saying. All right. Now, there's some local news, though, before we get on to some other stories. What's going on with Ashland? There's something going on circulating on social media with Ashland schools and their the baseball team, the soccer team, the track team. What's up?
So, like you said, this is a parents' Facebook post that I'm referencing. There's several of them out there that we're seeing this morning. We are waiting for clarification from members of the Southern Boone School District, and we will share when we get those. But the parents that we're seeing on Facebook are saying that construction on the, football field, soccer field, whatever you want to call it, has been bumped up several weeks unexpectedly, and it's now going to interrupt soccer and track season. And those athletes aren't going to have a place to practice, and they're not going to be able to host home games and home meets for the rest of their season. And so things like senior night is canceled. They had a benefit game for Sadie Robinette, who passed away from cancer several weeks ago. They had a benefit game planned for her. That's not going to happen anymore. And parents are rightfully so pretty upset about that. And especially for the senior class who aren't going to get to finish out their home games of their senior season. I think that's pretty sad. So I'm hoping we get some clarification from the school district today, and we will keep you guys updated.
If you have a reaction to that story, and I'm thinking about it, if you were a parent of a student there, if you're a student, but especially if you're a parent, a grandparent, what would you be thinking if in fact this is confirmed as true? That they'll be definitely crimped. Their style will be crimped. Let's put it that way.
It reminds me of COVID era stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. I was thinking the same.
There's a girls' soccer game tonight that we are hearing is still going on, but after that, it's donezo.
So they're just going to start construction in the middle of season?
Allegedly.
Huh.
I don't know.
My sister-in-law works for the school district.
Ooh.
Maybe I should send her a text. She's an early birdie.
Well, now with all the
Get the scoop.
With all the parks that are around, though, I mean, yeah, maybe Columbia has a lot of parks. Could they go and play in one of the public parks? Don't they have like field after field after field? Do it there. I mean, little hardship. I don't know. Is little hardship bad for the snowflakes as they're learning resiliency and that life's a you know what? I mean, just saying, couldn't they make it work? Some local, public play spaces.
There obviously could be some. Here's the thing, Randy. I don't know. I don't agree with you calling them snowflakes and stuff. I mean,
I'm kidding. But I'm just saying. I mean, what's wrong with driving somewhere to go have a practice or a game at another public facility that has grass and turf and a couple of goals?
Then it's all sorts of liability on the school district for the students getting to that practice in their cars. God forbid.
My kid goes to Tolton, and they practice across the street at a park for soccer. Their soccer team does. So that's not unheard of, Randy. I mean, that's
what I'm saying. I mean,
exactly. Now we have, and we're waiting to hear back from Hannah's reach out to the district. Hopefully they can give us some information, but it seems like it's all coming, there have been several people say stuff on social media, so we'll see what happens.
Unannounced. I mean, basically unpredicted, right? They had plans, and there's other things about that too, right? There might be opportunities for other teams to use that space. Clearly, track and field, right? Would that affect?
Their season is also impacted if this is true.
Yeah, I see. It's a problem.
And there's over 100 students on the track and field team, according to the Facebook post we're referencing.
Wow, that's a big team.
So
it really is.
We're talking about a lot of students impacted by this.
Huh. I'm thinking right down there south of Discovery Parkway, next to the Missouri Conservation Area, across from that lake with the big development there's a nice area there where they have big open fields. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking,
it's not that far from Ashland to the Jefferson City, North Jefferson City soccer complex either. They could maybe work a deal there.
Are there several fields there?
A bunch of them.
Yeah, they're right along the highway. And again, I don't know, John, I'm not exactly sure who owns those down there. They've changed hands a few times, but this goes back just a little very quick history about the turf field and things happening at Ashland. The voters approved and we reported, John and I, on this extensively in April of 2022. We're talking 2 years ago. The voters approved a $3 million bond issue aimed at improving the district facilities. And the big issues they said at the time, they had issues with the football and soccer field, that the track was more than 20 years old, And it's taken longer than what. It's just surprising. This thing got approved 2 years ago, and here we are still talking about it.
And it was scheduled for the summer, which would make absolute perfect sense. That's when you do it, right? And then suddenly the contractor says, oh, no, we have to do it now. Don't they have now some kind of a claim against the contractor if they had an agreement? I mean,
I imagine the school would have also had to agree to let them move their timeline up. I would assume, again, I'm not a construction expert by any means.
well, why would the school do that if it's so important?
That's what folks are asking. Why would you agree to this? Because also, an interesting caveat, Coach Cosmo on one of our sister stations, he was telling me this morning that, Southern Boone girls soccer is ranked like 4th or 5th in the state.
Yeah, they're pretty tough.
They're good. And I think that's like a little extra caveat.
That begs the question, why would the school authorities do this? There's got to be more to this story, right? Got to be more
You
to this
wonder
story.
if the contractors got challenges with materials or labor or something like that factors into it, like we've seen with so many, even the home builders.
Yeah, and
the
John,
things they've gone through.
and you're absolutely correct on that. When you and I reported on this, when they approved it in April of 2022, I quoted Southern Boone officials because I had talked to them. This is over about 2 years ago. They said due to possible supply shortages, they hope to bid construction in December of 2022. For some reason, it had to because of supply issues on the $3 million company. They were, I went down there. It was about a year ago. Do you remember that rat?
Yes.
White paper trash.
Yeah, there was allegedly they were not paying the prevailing wage, and there were some union guys that were out there picketing.
It was two dudes and an inflatable rat, if I remember.
Yeah, they were, and that my God, that stirred up more controversy on this show than I can remember. And the rat didn't have pants on. I remember that. But yeah, it's
a rat.
Yeah, exactly. But really, the big thing. I hope Matt Sharp is listening, and Hannah has reached out to him, and Matt does. Hopefully, he can get some information and help us sort this out because people want to know. People want to know.
Well, it's interesting. We'll have to see. Hey, look, and there's another side to this. In the scope of a life,
reduce the prospect of war, and because of Vietnam, and when I ran, I said that I was once asked, well, why when I was 29 years old, I said it must be a secret.
Time for the Daily DC Rundown. Jennifer Bukowski, who speaks a little Bidenese, I hope, might be able to translate that.
Yeah, when he ran, he promised us that because of the Vietnam War.
I don't get it. And his stare into the ethereal nothingness while he's saying this is classic. It's classic.
I mean, one doesn't have to be a doctor to know what's going on here. He's losing it, his gripe on his sanity, and his mind is wandering. And, against war, that's the Vietnam thing. That's where he first came up with that concept. And so I think that's where he's going with that. But it's every day you have a blunder. This is the man meeting with world leaders. And it's alarming to say the least. There's other bad news for Biden with the inflation is up. Consumer price indexes are up. Now they were promising us up to 3 rate cuts this year. Now they're saying it's a matter of if we're even going to have a rate cut this year, not when. This is big news and bad news for the prospect of a Biden re-election, but also for the American public who are paying so much more for groceries, etc. Rand Paul's out with a new book.
Yeah, he's got a book that he really was going after after Anthony Fauci.
And you remember how he was ridiculed and mocked to how dare he question St. Fauci when this all came out. But Rand Paul is a doctor as well. And he's like, look, you did fund these labs and you're lying about it right now. So I'm glad that he's not letting this go. And he has out with that new book. Hopefully there's this FISA bill you had some thoughts on. 19 House Republicans joined with Democrats to vote against a procedural move to begin a debate to reauthorize the nation's warrantless surveillance powers, throwing the intelligence tools authority into question. I personally wonder if this is a bad thing or not. I mean, anytime Democrats are all voting for it, I'm a little biased against it, but the FISA thing has always been troubling as a libertarian for me.
Well, and think about it. I mean, I think it speaks more to the FISA content at this point than it does this growing rebellion against Mike Johnson. There were 19 GOP House members, right? Before it was the Gates 8. Now it's the whatever 19.
Hopefully that's
growing. flip Hannah, hopefully from at least a center-right young voter to a Bidenista. But now, Hannah, in all fairness, Hannah, you did not take gender studies, right? You did ag, so you had a useful application of your degree.
Yeah, but I still had to take some Bravo Sierra courses along the way, as Gary Nolan would put it.
Did you have to, or was it something that you chose?
Well, you have to meet certain requirements based off of how courses are labeled, right? So I needed, I can't remember the exact credit that I needed, but I had to pick a psychology class basically.
Yeah.
And there was an online course called Intimate Relationships.
Intimate relationships.
Well, I was basically just trying to take as many online classes as I could, and that one met the requirement. I'm like, whatever.
That could come in handy in life, like giving you advice on how to have a successful relationship.
Well, and it sounds a lot, more raunchy than it really was. It was intimate in terms of, personal and like close relationships.
Had you met Brandon at this point?
I don't think so.
That could have been the
I would
lab.
think your animal husbandry courses in the ag department would qualify as gender identification.
Touche.
I when I was a public defender, I had the people that give the course that people that have domestic violence charges have to complete in order as part of their probation. And it has all these video vignettes that you watch and then you discuss. And I remember sitting there thinking, this would be useful for me or anyone here, because it shows you a scenario where, you just see the husband and wife are going to get in a fight. Someone's sitting there frustrated paying bills and another one's flipping the channels. And it's just like, what could have they done to avoid the situation and the anger? I'm like, this could help anybody, not just people charged with domestic violence.
It's funny how things can escalate. And you wonder, I mean, the violent acts, the stabbings, the shootings, you wonder how many of those things start out as just a dispute.
Yeah, someone says something a little too rudely, and then people get madder and madder.
Yeah, like someone gives someone the finger or something, and then things escalate.
Hannah.
Things escalate. I hate when that happens. It's unbelievable when that happens.
Well, talk to the cops. They'll tell you that the number one case they dread going on to a man or woman is a domestic violence case.
Really?
For sure. It's the most volatile.
Just unpredictable, volatile, yeah.
Yeah, we attorneys say that with criminal law, you get bad people on, and this is general rule, on their best behavior. With family law, you get good people on their worst behavior. And just from being involved enough to refer people to attorneys, normal people are like losing their minds, telling me all of their business in my Facebook Messenger.
Oh, really?
Just is so upset. And these are like normal people with, good careers and everything, but they just, I thankfully have not gone through this because people really do lose their minds during divorce cases.
Well, I guess, we all have those primal capacities, right, to act out and become savages. It happens, and that's what criminal behavior is about. Of the criminal cases that you're aware of, if you were just to take the universe of criminal cases, violent, between people type stuff, how many of those are wanton, willful, I'm going to do something, and I don't mean just first-degree murder, but, I'm going to go and I'm going to sexually assault this woman. We heard about this story, was it yesterday we talked about it, John, where allegedly we were talking with Locke Thompson, wasn't it with Locke?
Yeah, when the guy out of Centertown allegedly bonding women out of jail and taking them to his property and then assaulting them.
So how many of those kinds of just acts against persons, against people, are planned and thought out, and they're just evil criminal minds, and how many are just rage of the moment? It's curious.
I think it makes the news a lot more often when it is a stranger situation, because those are a lot more rare than people who know each other.
I see.
Like the shootings you see in town that occur, that's often, people that they're in different groups and they're beefing, and social media is not helping the situation, but they already know each other and are aware of each other. They're not picking someone at random to commit a crime against. They already have a target in mind. So it's much more unusual, and that's why you have all these podcasts and Netflix shows and everything about the crazies that do go after strangers and do bad things.
Yeah, I know that, John, you were saying since Jen's in the studio, we need to be talking about this cold case from decades ago. And I don't know if we're going to have enough. Yeah, do we have enough time to talk about that now? Going to do that or at 6:50?
We can get into it now.
Let's get into it now. Let's describe the case, and maybe some of you will remember it, some won't. But this was the case of a man charged with murder.
Well, and John, you're reporting on that in news this morning,
in
right?
2020, right, John?
Yeah, we
Tell
talked
us
to
about it.
Locke Thompson. The story goes back to Russellville in Cole County, a murder of a 14-year-old Greg Jones in 1991. At the time, his 15-year-old classmate, Christopher Nemeth, was arrested shortly after, taken into custody, tried to go through the juvenile system. They said there was not enough probable cause, and he was released. Fast forward to 2020, Cole County Prosecutor Locke Thompson is now charged murder in that case. And we talked to the prosecutor yesterday and said, well, going on 4 years down the road, why hasn't it been changed? And Jen, his take on it was capital murder cases often take years before they hit the courtroom.
4 years, though. I mean, I don't know what time of the year in 2020 it was filed, but you don't have to bring the charges until you're basically ready to go, right? Like, It's been how long? Since 1991? I would think they would have built their case up and been ready to proceed when they decided to file such old charges. Particularly, this is a 15-year-old accused of killing a 14-year-old. It looks like, I'm looking at various sources, they have evidence that he admitted to 3 people being involved with this killing. I wonder what was, it's unclear to me. I'm not able to find what was the triggering event that led to them filing such a cold case.
That's weird.
And this is a guy who owned the Golden Corral.
Yeah.
So he posted $1 million bond. So there are a lot of unusual things with this case.
And this was
the other angle on it was, too, that he was the Fulton police chief at the time. Steve Myers said that he was also called a person of interest in a 2005 murder of a woman, Shwanda Reed of Fulton, and he was never charged in that unsolved case. So
that is really interesting. But I've run him through CaseNet, and I'm not finding him in CaseNet, and so that's interesting. So is he
First name, I think, William Christopher Nemeth is his whole name.
Yeah, I wondered what kind of criminal history he has.
So wait a minute, the Golden Corral comes up in this story. We've talked about the Golden Corral in Columbia. Is this a different Golden Corral that this individual owns?
I think it was Fulton.
In Fulton. This is the guy that was 15?
He was 15
when
years
he was
old.
charged, and then the charges were dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so now there's no DNA mentioned here or anything. So this would be the kind of a thing where someone spills the truth to someone else who spills the truth to someone, or whatever they've heard. They spill what they've heard to someone, and then the telephone chain gets going, and eventually Locke Thompson or someone finds out about it, and that's right. Is that what you're gleaning from this?
That's as far as I can see. His attorney is asking he filed a motion for it to be dismissed, saying that there's no forensic evidence to link him to the killing.
That was my question. Yeah. So attorneys do that, though. I've been told by attorneys that's what you learn to do. The first thing you do is you always file to dismiss.
That's
is that what you
civil,
always do?
not
the
in
defendant
criminal.
always you do that?
No, not in criminal.
Oh, you don't do that in criminal. Okay.
That's what the civil
What's the
lawyers
difference?
do.
Why can't do it, or you don't do it?
Well, in civil, you can. They have a different evidentiary roles where you can say, well, based on the pleadings alone, this is a summary judgment, or dismiss the case with a summary judgment.
Yeah.
We just don't have that step in criminal proceedings.
Oh, okay. Have you ever thought of having a civil system that's like the small claims court, where citizen A goes up against citizen B, argues their case in front of a judge or a jury, and I'm sorry, I don't want to cut the lawyers out of fees, but a lot of times,
Well, we do have that.
Yeah, it's called Judge Judy.
Well, we have a small claims court.
No, but
And I've represented my
that's the
brother
problem,
in that.
small
I was the
claims.
only attorney there.
Why does it only apply to small claims? Why can't you take your case? Because if you think about it, the system is really very, what's the word? It's monopolized.
But they do have small claims courts, so where people represent themselves.
Yeah, but you can't. But it's limited in the dollar amount. Why does it? Why not $100,000, $200,000, $1 million? Why can't you say I'm suing Hannah because of something? I'm still traumatized. What Hannah did to me.
You
Still
can.
traumatized.
Snowflake.
And and I say I want to sue her for $1 million. So I want to just go up against the judge. I don't have the money to pay lawyers, and I'm going to go and argue my case.
You can. It's called representing yourself pro se.
Yeah, but I think the judges.
They don't like it.
Why don't they like it?
Well, because there's rules of evidence, there's all kinds of procedural motions, and if you don't know what you're doing, the judge isn't allowed to give you legal advice. It happens in criminal too.
I'm just
if
speculating.
People defend themselves.
Why? I'm cross-examining you here. Why do you think those procedural rules and so complicated a jungle that only lawyers can figure them out have become procedural rules that only lawyers can figure them out?
Well,
you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It's the same
lawyers
way.
got to eat, Randy. That's
But
what
it's
that
the same,
is.
no, I mean it's the same thing with Doctorville. I'm really glad that the medical profession has become more transparent and there's more involvement, there's more partnership and more transparency, and you can actually be involved in the organic decision making. And that doesn't seem to exist in the legal system. It's a very cloistered environment. Now, that could be said it's to do that for, because I've had conversations with a lot of just common blokes who say, I'd really like to go after that guy whose tree fell on my lawn, but, it fell on my driveway and hit my car, but I don't have the money to hire a lawyer and do it. You know what I mean? And it just seems as though, because it's so complicated, it's sort of like the regulatory environment. Little wannabe startup companies are increasingly finding it harder to get a voice in the well, it's not a walk from the House side to the Senate side. They're supposed to walk the impeachment articles over. That was supposed to happen this week. Mike Johnson has put it on delay till next week. It's clear that Senator Schumer doesn't want some purple state, in one case a red state, Montana, senators to have to be on record saying that they voted, basically for open borders by voting against convicting this guy on the impeachment articles. Well, here's what Senator John Kennedy had to say about it, and boy, it was a doozy.
We're not talking here about some snowbro who lives off chicken McNuggets and weed and happens to have an opinion. The United States House of Representatives, elected by all of the American people, spent months investigating our border policy and Secretary Mayorkas's role in it. And then they thoughtfully crafted and they passed with a majority vote 2 articles of impeachment. And now my Senate Democratic colleagues want to toss them out in the trash like a week-old tuna salad sandwich.
Oh, man.
There is no one that spins a yarn like that guy. I mean, he just has those sound bites one after another.
It's enviable. The colorful phrasing he uses, it's really makes you pay attention to what he has to say.
And we were talking about lawyers and judges and, the whole, adversarial atmosphere that does define the courtroom, right? If I'm a juror, if I'm a judge, this guy's got a leg up on everyone else in the courtroom.
I was just thinking he would be magical in the courtroom.
Can't you imagine? I don't know what kind of John. Do you know what kind of law John Kennedy was he? Was he a criminal attorney? I don't know.
I do not know.
But I mean, my gosh, what an effective attorney he would be in a courtroom setting. I mean, just amazing. Because there's no doubt the quality of the witness, the quality of the arguments on behalf of the witness, or the defendant or the plaintiff, it's a human endeavor as much as it's a legal, logical endeavor, right?
You have to be engaging to get the jurors to pay attention to your witness, the evidence you're putting on, and it's not always easy. But who was good at this is Kevin Crane when he was prosecutor.
Yeah,
he was had a strong voice. He used a lot of facial expressions, colorful language, and just kept the jury's attention. And I watched one trial where the other attorneys, you could barely hear what they were saying. And so those attorneys were totally out lawyered.
That's interesting. So does that mean that perhaps if one of your youngsters out there in listening land is thinking about becoming an attorney at some point, it's a fascinating profession. The more I talk with you and Stephanie, and I just, we get to know some of the legislators, it's a fascinating, when you guys talk about the law, it's fascinating. But it sounds like you ought to take some drama class in high school.
Actually, when I was first practicing and doing all these jury trials, I looked into it. Can I take acting classes? Yeah. Because I need to, be able to control my facial expression when, things aren't going my way.
Yeah.
Poker face. Yeah. So I think I could do that, but I thought it would be very helpful just for your voice and your allocution and just your elucidation to have those gifts that is helpful in the courtroom, no doubt.
The way he presents things, you can't but help but give him his stock price is higher whatever side of the argument he's on. It's just amazing. What a throw him
But yeah,
away.
Why are they doing that? Why is McConnell protecting
I don't know.
those senators from that vote? Why can't they follow through with that? That doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah, he's got a point.
All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking with a retired
I'll give you that. Yes. Yes. So now the barnstorm of people are going to flood my timeline.
Well, that was Dawn Staley, the South Carolina ladies Gamecocks coach, getting herself in a lot of hot water the other day, the ladies basketball coach. Kim Russell, who's an ambassador with Independent Women's Forum, has a different take on that, I suspect, having been persecuted for her speech defending women's rights when it comes to playing only against women. Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I saw that, and it was just jaw-droppingly amazing that she said that, knowing, I mean, she said it during the clip, that she knew it was going to get a lot of pushback. I haven't seen that she's walked that back, and I'm frankly a little surprised. You?
I am, and I've had numerous long conversations with people since she made that comment, and I have listened to her comment over and over again. And honestly, my belief is she doesn't really feel that way. And what I would love to share with everyone is that as a coach and a woman, I believe that she is so concerned about the well-being of her own players at the moment, right? And what they are about to go through the next day and that day. And because of the narrative that has been pushed so hard through the college, every, institution at the college level, and now actually younger, the narrative that is being pushed and that these kids are believing, my belief about Dawn Staley's comment and where she was coming from is that with her making that comment, her players were going to be okay to play the next day. Yeah. And that she wouldn't, as a woman, and I believe as a human, we are concerned about others and their well-being. And because of this narrative that is being pushed, everybody is being told, that these kids will commit suicide. Well, it's not just kids who have body dysmorphia who are depressed and anxious and perhaps suicidal, but the narrative that's being pushed is that someone will commit suicide if you say the wrong thing.
Talk to us about how this whole debate squares with Title IX going back to the 70s and all. We haven't heard that much talk in recent days about Title IX and this whole debate.
I would love to talk about that. So Title IX is what gave us these opportunities. So that's why Dawn Staley has the opportunity to be where she is, along with her incredible ability as an athlete and a coach. She is definitely one of the best coaches of all time, not just for basketball, I believe, and not just for women. The women's and men's games in every sport are very different in how they're played. All you had to do is watch the finals of the men's and women's basketball games to see how differently they're played. So Title IX, not only gave women the opportunities to play, but the opportunities to play with other women with the same, obviously not every woman has the same physical attributes, but we are born with the same physical, whether it's the ability to birth a baby, to nurse a baby, all of these things that are very different from a male. So Title IX has also given us the opportunities for education that girls and women didn't have in the past. But from a sports standpoint, the physical differences between a male and a female, there is no question. There's no question in the research. And this is where we have to stand firm. And what's happening with what Biden is trying to do with the rewrite is to make it all gender-based and whatever you identify as. And So it's already happening today where kids are saying, you know, I identify as this, and they're being allowed to play. And women are not just getting, and girls are getting hurt physically with life-changing injuries that we've all seen. Peyton McNabb in North Carolina a couple years ago spiked in the face by a male player. And this doesn't just cover transgender. That was not a transgender male, but males were allowed to play on volleyball teams in North Carolina because there wasn't a male team. That is what happened with her case, where she now has life-changing injuries. She still has partial paralysis, and she wasn't able to continue playing. It's happened to another volleyball player in California, and if your audience hasn't seen it, the field hockey, again, not a transgender, just a male field hockey player in Massachusetts, broke the jaw, knocked out most of the teeth of a player on the opposing team with a hit towards the goal. That was, the quickness and the speed of a male and the strength cannot. You put a woman of the same size, quote unquote, next to the male, you cannot compete, period.
That's Kim Russell. She's an independent Women's Forum ambassador and formerly the head women's lacrosse coach at Oberlin College, joining us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Coach, this is Jennifer Bukowski, and I just remember I was never a collegiate athlete, but as a high school runner, working so hard, to try to fight to keep my spot on the varsity cross-country team. So I was like 7th or 8th on the team, and I gave it my all. And if I had been in a situation where all of a sudden a few boys joined the team, I probably would have quit. Do you see that happening, where girls will stop even trying to participate and compete in sports should this trend continue?
Absolutely. And that is such a good example, Jennifer, because, one, those boys, again, same size, are probably going to be faster, right?
Right. They're automatically going to take up varsity spots.
Exactly. And so not only does that take your spot away and that opportunity, so it's not just the opportunity to compete, it's the opportunity for that community with other girls.
Right.
And when you add a male to that, that changes the dynamic. And so the opportunity is being taken away, but also when you add a male to, anybody who's...
I wouldn't have seen like I have no chance. It doesn't matter if I keep practicing harder. I'm not going to be able to surpass the males.
Right.
So what's the point? And the whole reason we have women's sports is because the women and the men are not at equal level with this.
Exactly. It's about, equality. And what people aren't taking into consideration, too, is everybody's worried about the feelings of the trans because of this narrative that's being pushed. How about we consider the girls and consider the women?
Mm-hmm.
So the psychological and mental injuries, I'll call them, that are happening to girls and women are egregious right now. We're putting a fully intact male in a women's locker room and telling the girls that they have to go to psych services if they have a problem with
I remember, too, we were embarrassed to change in front of each other in high school.
Exactly.
I cannot even imagine a man or a boy being in there.
Kim, let me ask you this. We've seen isolated and seemingly rare instances where a women's team has just forfeited the game and said, look, we're not going to compete. And I think making a stand, I've seen it at a college, at a high school, maybe a JUCO level in the Midwest. And we've seen isolated reports. And full transparency, I was not a team sports guy. I was I was a band guy, okay? And so I did individual sports, so I don't fully understand the cohesion and the gravity of what that would mean, forfeiting a match. But is there room for that in this battle for women to fight back and just say, no, we're not going to participate in this absurd travesty?
Yes, and that's happening. And my heart hurts for those who have to do that because it's just, again, taking away another opportunity for an entire team. But it is making a statement. right? And so each team or coach is making that decision. And I had a conversation with a parent actually this past week who asked me, because he's on the board of a private school and they're making policy right now. And he said, what would you recommend as our policy for our girls sports teams if they go up against a team that has males participating on, a girls team? And I said, you have to not play them.
Right. Like for you coach lacrosse, I was telling Randy on the break, like that's one in particular.
Yeah.
You could not have girls playing against men.
That can be a
You
sharp
could get
elbow
super
match.
injured.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the games are different, right? The speed of the men's shot is upwards of 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
And not to say that there aren't harder women's shots now than there were when I played, because of the way the sticks are manufactured now and technology and all of these things, but it is a different game. And I believe we would see the death of either a defender or a goalie if a male lacrosse player is allowed to play with women.
Wow,
that's astounding. That is earth-shattering.
And avoidable, totally avoidable.
Correct, exactly. And it's different if you're talking about, people play co-ed all the time. If you've ever played co-ed, the men do not play the same against the women when you're playing co-ed. They're not trying to tackle you. They're not trying to take you out. They're actually very protective of women when you play together in that way, right? So when people give me that example, I said, no, it is completely different. Yeah. The level of competition the men use when they play against or with women in a co-ed environment is not the same as when it's an all-male team. So that is not a fair comparison.
Kim Russell, a tip of the hat to you for leading the charge, along with so many of your colleagues there at IWF, Independent Women's Forum. Thank you so much for being an ambassador for just keeping the sanctity of women's sports. It seems like such a simple thing, but it takes great leaders like you to get it through those knuckleheads in the woke universe. Thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate it. to go at 7:25:40. 7:25:40. So we would have been in the 7:25 segment. And John, she with this you-know-what-eating grin on her face lets the bumper music play till we go past the 7:26 mark.
It was an accident.
Oh, an accident.
Yeah.
No, you should have seen the look on producer Hannah's face. Are you going to make a video out of that? You're going to make a video out of that. Yeah.
I didn't have the camera on my face.
Oh, didn't have the camera on the face. Isn't that peculiar?
Sorry.
What's hot with Hannah at 7:25, delayed by a minute because of Hannah's bumper music spectacular.
Was good bumper music.
Yeah, I was just jamming. Sorry.
I purposely got you there on time, and look what you did.
Purposely, yeah, right. Anywho, we were just talking to a retired women's coach, Kim Russell, in the last segment, and she was talking about transgender athletes in women's sports and how that's a hot topic right now. A female athlete who is making all sorts of headlines. Of course, the one and only Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
Talk about an explosive basketball season for her. Her team, the Iowa Hawkeyes, fell just short of the NCAA title last week. But Caitlin Clark is still very much in the headlines, even though she's wrapped up her senior season and she's declared for the WNBA draft. Excited to see where she goes. But she is the leading all-time NCAA scorer for either men's or women's basketball. And yesterday, in their end-of-season ceremony, the Iowa Hawkeyes announced that they will be retiring her number. So there will never again be a number 22 on the women's basketball team at Iowa. So I thought that was really cool, and talk about, a great way to end a collegiate basketball career.
Now, that is neat. But now you know a little bit about basketball, right? You played basketball at Centralia, right?
I played a lot on the bench, but yes,
So
I grew up playing.
Now, what position was she? She was a guard, right?
I think she was pretty much everything.
She was a guard?
But yeah, guard.
What position did you play?
I was more of a post.
What is the post?
Slash on the bench.
I'm not a big basketball player.
I was the big girl down low, right?
Oh,
you're. What did you think of this offer that she apparently turned down from Ice Cube to participate? She was offered $5 million to play in Ice Cube's Big 3 League, where it'd be a 3-on-3 basketball. I think that would be an interesting way to watch basketball. What do you think, Hannah?
That was one of those stories I read the headline but didn't look too much into. Was that going to be instead of going to the WNBA?
Yes. So he was trying to lure her away from the WNBA, gave her a $5 million offer to join his new 3-on-3 basketball league.
I don't know. I kind of respect her turning down the money because, let's face
desperado Donald Trump. Fighting back, trying to delay the trial till he can be president, and then he's going to pardon himself, right, Jen? There's an interesting story about protecting, I guess, the sanctity of the objectivity of the witness pool, right? Is that what's going on here? There's some story about his.
So we have 4 different cases going on, criminal cases. That's not counting the civil cases that are going on against Trump. One of them is the Florida case with the Mar-a-Lago raid and the document search. And in that case, there's a new 24-page ruling by Judge Eileen M. Cannon instructing Trump's lawyers to refer to the witnesses in their filing with pseudonyms or categorical descriptions rather than identifying them by name to protect them from potential threats or harassment. These are career, I guess, civil servants and former advisors to Mr. Trump, and they're concerned about threats from, quote, Trump world. But, I'm kind of torn on this because, we do have, as the public, we have a right to the transparency in the proceedings, and we have a right to maybe know which government officials are testifying against Trump, are cooperating with the government in this ridiculous documents case. And so where does, I think our right as the public to open courts, to have transparency in what's being done to Donald Trump in this case, how does that factor in? Judge Cannon weighed all of that, I guess, and decided to go ahead and agree with the government to make the Trump team redact the names of 24 witnesses in court papers. I think she's been pretty even-keeled, Judge Cannon, in her decision, so that maybe that's a good one.
She's a Trump appointee, right?
She is.
Yeah.
And pretty young. She's a superstar. In other cases that are pending, Stormy Daniels, has another request to delay that trial has been denied. So on Gary Nolan yesterday, I was talking about the 24 questions that the jurors are going to be asked in voir dire on that Stormy Daniels hush money case that was brought by in Manhattan against Trump. It's a weak case. It's about how he kept his accounting records and his books, and whether he knew Michael Cohen was going to report, the money he paid him as revenue instead of putting it in his trust account for a payment and things like that. So that case is the only one that looks like it's going to proceed to election before trial, but it's going to tie Trump up. He's going to have, be dealing with that in the courtroom when he needs to be on the campaign trail.
There's more about that case, that Stormy Daniels thing. So this 2018 statement that she made, basically saying that, I had nothing to do with Donald Trump. Remember, she signed in a statement. It was a 2018 statement, and she admitted that the affair never happened. She was not paid hush money. And then when she was asked in a 60 Minutes interview sometime a while back, what was that all about? Are you denying that? Well, I thought that there'd be legal repercussions if I didn't sign it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she signed a statement. So why isn't the case closed? I mean, Hauswirth and I could have this settled in a week or two. I mean, just be done. Let us go up and argue in front of the judge.
The trial isn't whether or not they had an affair. The trial is just this novel legal theory about the way that Trump kept his accounting records of these payments that were made to kill the story. This is where, the National Enquirer gets the story. They're trying to kill it, and she's being paid basically money to hush her up, and how they kept their books on that, and whether Trump defrauded himself because he owns these companies by mislabeling what the money was really for. It's just a ridiculous legal theory that they're even bringing a criminal case against him, especially given you're using valuable taxpayer resources on that when you have all these other crimes and problems in New York that you should be focusing on to protect public safety. That's your real role. And this case has nothing to do with fulfilling that role. It's all about get Trump.
Yeah, so really it's not the affair that's in dispute. It's about the accounting of money that went to Stormy.
It's an accounting thing. Yeah. I remember reading it when it finally came out. It was the first one to get filed. I was like, this is the big thing that they've been hyping for this long. And this is from 2016, 8 years ago.
crazy.
Yeah.
It just
Jen,
doesn't
what
make
about
sense.
the angle that we've heard from the opponents to this whole Trump hush money case about the whole angle of jury nullification and all that, and saying, well, the jury's buying into all these made up motions that Trump's team has filed and filed again?
I hope that they are onto something, but it is not a very Trump-friendly venue that they're going to be pulling jurors from. And some of these juror questions that they're being asked, I think, are going to make the jurors biased against Trump. They're being asked, I need to pull this up from when I talked on Gary Nolan yesterday, like, have you read this book? You know, how Trump thwarted the legal system. Like, they're going to be asked about specific book titles that are inflammatory in nature. They're going to be asked, aren't you supposed to be seeking a fair and impartial jury? And when you're reading all these titles of books, aren't you kind of making them partial?
Doesn't the judge have some kind of...
These are the judge's questions that he's going to ask the jurors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
some
I
of
guess...
them are standard, but some of them, and they're so one-sided, they're like, have you been to a Trump rally? Because they want to get rid of anyone that might like Trump.
Won't that...
But they don't say, have you been to a Biden rally or a Hillary rally?
Yeah, well, won't that serve to Trump's advantage in an appeal? Should he lose at the trial court?
Maybe, but trial courts have a lot of discretion when it comes to voir dire and what questions to allow. So it's really hard to get a conviction overturned based on the judge's use of his discretion during voir dire.
Well, speaking of trial courts, that Columbia, the Douglas Park murderers, alleged murderers, the stabbing incident, that guy is going to be arraigned today. Is that right?
Well, technically, I was at the Ready board meeting. He would have been scheduled to be arraigned yesterday. It would have been via video, and it did happen. I just don't know. I was at the Ready board meeting, so I don't know exactly what was said. Probably not very much.
What happened yesterday?
And here's the situation on that. Basically, Jen knows this from on this. He's jailed without bond, so basically all the initial arraignment is, and they're important, don't get me wrong, it's a first chance for reporters to see him. He'd be on video, and then basically, do you have an attorney or not? Do you have an attorney? That's basically what that is. He is going to argue self-defense. As we've reported yesterday, the victim, according to court documents, was stabbed 20 times. His throat was cut, and a taser was used as well. And I'm glad we have Jen on the show because Helene yesterday, Jen, asked, I thought, and of course we had Locke Thompson on the show, and I was very interested in this Kemper case, which is huge in Jefferson City, but I'm glad Helene did ask about what happened to Jay Ashcroft down at the AIPAC rally because you were there as well.
Yeah.
And he flat out confirmed he is still, and he said, I can't comment on any pending investigations, and we pinned him down. He confirmed that he's still investigating, but I think just to repeat for people that didn't listen that day that you were there, I've heard some people downplay what happened there because there were people, and the mayor of Jeff City told me he had people shouting at him as well when he tried to get into the building. So what exactly happened that day? And this was Ashcroft. I know he told us they tried to push him down. At least one tried to push him down. Right. And then they're looking at possibly filing charges. It's still under investigation.
Yeah, it was an event for AIPAC, which is a group that promotes, America's special relationship with Israel. There were a huge amount of anti-Israel protesters, both in the Capitol and then surrounding this building that Revel Catering is in. It's like catty corner from the Capitol. It's a 2-story building, kind of small, because they were surrounding on 3 different sides, like 4 or 5 people thick. And I had to walk this gauntlet because usually you go in the front door. I'm like, how do you get into this thing? Throwing a bullhorn, screaming at me, calling me the B word, going around saying that I'm for child murdering, that I'm for this and that. I was not shoved like Jay Ashcroft was, and the person that made that bodily contact with him was arrested. But to get into the event, had to run this whole gauntlet of people trying to convince me not to go into this event and screaming at me and calling me all sorts of, I wasn't used to it. Then during the event, they were screaming throughout the event, and it was unnerving. It's like, are they going to break down the door? At one point, they're pounding on the door. Someone that was armed was going down to address the situation in case they were about to come in and assault people. But I was there with, Cole County judges, all kinds of noteworthy people were there at that event. And then when we leave, they were harassing us and yelling at us as well, which it was dark at that time. And so I didn't leave by myself on purpose because I didn't want to have to walk that gauntlet again by myself.
And where were the police?
There were police out in front, which I appreciated because it made me feel safer to go ahead. If they hadn't been there, I don't know that I would have gone to the event out of fear for my own personal safety.
Well, I remember you expressed how threatened you felt, and I'm sure others that were going to the event felt the same way. Jay Ashcroft related how he was physically, basically tried to be pushed down and fought back and was able to stand up. But I went a little ballistic saying, "My God, we cannot let this go."
I don't think they pushed him down, but they did.
But they tried.
They tried, yeah.
And I it's like, by golly, we can't let this go. And it's good to hear that Locke, he couldn't talk about it, but obviously there's an investigation going on, or else he would have talked about it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, hopefully it'll all
Here's the question I have for our listeners, and for Jen, I'll have you weigh in. I'll just throw this question out to the listeners. If that were a group of guys wearing MAGA hats, Trump supporters, Trump signs, and preventing progressives from getting into the building, would the media have covered that a little differently, you think?
Oh, yeah, I think so. It would have been, white supremacists and all. Instead of people that are there were people claiming to be Jewish there and against Israel's handling of the situation. I don't know whether or not they were actually Jewish, but they were Jews against IPAC there. But it did seem like very anti-Semitic to me.
Yeah,
a lot of the things they were chanting and doing were anti-Semitic.
And the signs actually said, and you saw them, the signs actually said, and this is in the Columbia, Missourian photo, event canceled. That's the
thing. It says event canceled for complicity in genocide. That was one banner. On the other side, there was a sign purporting to be, names of kids that have died. And I don't want kids to die in Palestine. It's a really tragic situation, but it was an intense event. I don't know how we got onto this topic, but
we're in a country
And literally anybody else of North Richland, Texas wants to give them a chance. He is a 35-year-old 7th grade math teacher and Army veteran who legally changed his name from Dustin Eby. He says America should not be stuck between choosing between the king of debt and an 81-year-old. Literally anybody else isn't a person. It's a rally cry. Else needs 113,000 voters' signatures who did not vote in the presidential primary in order to run as an independent. And at this time, we cannot confirm stories that a sister of the Catholic Church Benedictine Order of Fort Worth has also filed as none of the above. And now you know the rest of that story.
I admire the creativity, but maybe I'm overthinking it, but would that be binding? Like, could he literally say, "Oh, I got this many votes"?
Maybe.
I mean, obviously not going to win, right? But
it reminds me of when Chief Wannadoobie was running against Roy Blunt. That was an amusing headline. Literally anybody else. What a name.
I admire the determination and the dedication to that, to go all the way to legally changing.
Yeah, well, and the expense involved as well.
Right.
It is what it is, I guess.
I was watching name change, and when I was sitting in a docket the other day, they had name changes on. They ask you why you're changing your name. I could just imagine some of our judges' faces. Someone got up there and said they want to be Chief Wannadoobie, or literally anybody else, or none of the above. Oh my gosh. That had to be an amusing court docket to sit through.
Or maybe not, like you said, knowing some of the judges who might fail to see the humor in it.
Yeah, but it's a free country as long as you're not doing it to defraud people, or you can go ahead and change your name to something ridiculous, and we've seen that done, or even a symbol like Prince. But I think he ended up changing that back. In any event, so gonna bake a carrot cake today. Getting ready for that for my kid's birthday. Not my favorite cake.
You sound like Stephanie.
She likes the carrot cake too. It's okay. Cream cheese recipe.
Well, the thing with Stephanie, like, carrot cake is her number one dessert, and that's what blows my mind. Like, vegetables in your dessert? Come on, man.
That's not number one for me. That's for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a Stephanie top of the hits list for her at all.
Yeah, but she said that's her favorite, huh? Well, my kid came out of nowhere and really wants this carrot cake. I've never made one before, so looking up recipe, gotta give that a go today, because we're having the event tomorrow. I'm gonna get ahead of it.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in your carrot cake endeavors.
Thank you. I hope I've got all the ingredients here. I was checking that out. And also checking out, we've got some bad economic news that we're going to have Aaron Hedlund working with us to understand. We were hoping to get some rate cuts, with the mortgage industry and the housing industry being what they are. It's really hard for people to get homes. No one wants to move because you're going to have to get a much smaller house with the same mortgage payment, with the rates. But it's looking like we might not even get rate cuts at all this year, much less multiple cuts.
As a, wanting to be a first-time home buyer,
yeah,
it's real rough. It hurts my heart.
Yeah. So inflation is staying high. That's not good for the Biden campaign, but that's not good for America either. So we're going to have Aaron Hedlund from the Show Me Institute breaking that all down for us next. was different. In this case, they bought the kid the 9mm. In this case, they blatantly ignored signs that he wanted help, that he was asking for help, and did not disclose to the school when they were called in about, hey, we're concerned your kid might be violent, that they had purchased that 9mm for him. So they said, don't worry, that doesn't mean that we are going to be charging parents in every case. But then, interestingly enough, also breaking yesterday is an ex-assistant principal was charged in connection with a 6-year-old shooting a teacher. So this is another case where you have a person that is not the shooter being charged for the actions of a kid that shot at a school. So I do think that we are going to see more of a trend of this, whether that's good or bad. You can let us know your thoughts. You can text 573-874-9390 or calling 800-529-5572. And now we're still waiting on Aaron Hedlund. I got to send him a text. Show Me Institute. I'm on the board of the Show Me Institute. And so I'll be like, Aaron, am I technically kind of his boss a little bit then if I'm on the board?
Jen, we brought up this whole angle of parents being held liable or criminally liable for their kids' activities. And we talked yesterday about the angle about parents knowingly providing alcohol to underage drinkers and the mindset of, well, I'd rather have them drinking out in the backyard by the family pool than cruising around town and all of them. We've seen that prosecuted in Missouri, haven't we?
Yeah, that can be prosecuted for providing alcohol to a minor. That's a misdemeanor, and it could also be a big civil liability to do. And I've heard instances of that, where parents are known or renowned for allowing a lot of liquor, providing liquor, and that is a really bad idea, parents, because you can get sued. There have been kids, a kid got paralyzed, on a spend the night, and I just don't understand these parents that do provide alcohol parties for their kids, because you're really putting your assets on the line and endangering those kids potentially if something were to occur. Unless you're super sure that no one's going to be driving anywhere, which with teenagers, if you're going to go to bed, how could you be?
Good luck.
Not a good idea. But we are now joined by Aaron Hedlund, chief economist from the Show Me Institute. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Good to be on.
Well, Wall Street Journal yesterday said Fed rate cuts are now a matter of if, not just when. Tell us about this news and what it means.
I mean, to be honest, this is not news to me. This is something I've been saying for a while, and I don't say that to gloat. It's just telling you I've been thinking this for a while, which is that inflation is not down to 2%. That is the Fed target, and the news keeps coming in now 3 months in a row. Inflation's hot. So the idea that to me, I think it was a mistake when Jerome Powell came out in December and basically telegraphed, hey, rate cuts are coming. Well, mission wasn't accomplished. So you can't really say that until you're actually there. And because we've now had 3 months in a row that are bad, it does raise the question of when will these things actually happen? It could be much further in the future than people were thinking.
Could they be raised?
I think that's pretty unlikely for a while. I mean, if inflation starts to look real bad, then maybe they do that. But I mean, there's going to be some major reputational damage to them if they have to admit that they were totally wrong and have to raise rates. Now, ultimately, you have to put the health of the country above, concerns about reputation. But my sense is they're just going to hold things higher for a while where they are. And if inflation starts to get even worse, then maybe we talk about rate hikes.
So what does this mean for people like producer Hannah who are looking to buy a home? What is going to happen to mortgage rates and home prices this year?
I'm on the edge of my seat here, Aaron.
Yeah. So, well, it's definitely not good news for mortgages because, mortgages are based on, mortgages really aren't based so much on current interest rates that the Fed is setting. They're based on what the markets think the Fed's going to be doing over the next several years. So I don't think there's going to be a dramatic effect on mortgage rates because people are probably thinking, oh, this delays things by months, not years. But yeah, it means that a lot of the rate reductions in mortgages that we've seen in the past several months, because rates at one point were close to 8%. They're not that high now. that the rate reductions have been entirely because not things the Fed has done, because the Fed hasn't cut rates at all yet. It's been entirely based on the Fed saying they would cut. So when people realize these cuts are not happening for a while longer, that's going to have a negative impact on mortgages.
Aaron, talk to us about Missouri's economy and how it's growing. I know it's lagging behind the national levels. We're kind of historically down there a little bit in the dumps. And maybe the second part of that question is, what about the lack of Missouri having a tech corridor like a Silicon Valley or a Route 128? What's that do to us trying to drive that big part of the economy?
Yeah, I mean, Missouri's in this difficult position where, I mean, for many, many years, Missouri's economy was really bottom 10 in the country for growth. I'd have to look at the latest numbers to see. I don't think we're bottom 10 now, so we can, I guess, celebrate that minor achievement. But when you think about, you mentioned tech corridors, where do those come from? Well, when I think about places like Austin, they have a tech corridor because they have a tax corridor, namely the entire state of Texas doesn't have an income tax. Or you talk about a tech corridor that's happening in Miami. Well, you also have a tax corridor in Florida, the absence of an income tax. So they've got a very competitive tax environment and an overall orientation in those states, and also Tennessee and Utah is getting a lot of tech as well. These are pro-growth oriented states. And unfortunately, a lot of the political class in Missouri, they think about, well, let's just use more subsidies, and we're going to use subsidies. We're going to try to recruit a specific employer. We're going to woo this one employer, and that's going to do the job. And we've done this for decades, and it never works. And yet we keep doing the same thing. So I find it to be a bizarre. It's always a bizarre strategy to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So maybe we should learn the lesson from other states and pursue bolder changes to our tax code and regulations to attract businesses across every industry.
I couldn't agree more with you there, Aaron. And I don't see any of our Republican leaders talking about tax credit reform. Like, can we start approaching this problem differently, and instead of handing out credits to certain companies that have the connections and the lobbyists to get a tax credit passed for them? Couldn't we, or the connections with the executive branch to get that done? Couldn't we just lower it for everyone so that, we are more attractive of an option? Why is it, do you think, that there's such resistance to doing that in Jefferson City?
Well, I think there's a couple factors there. One is that lobbyists have so much power in Jefferson City. Mm-hmm. It's really sad. So, it's not surprising that lobbyists want these credits because it's like a concentrated benefit, right? If you can take taxpayer money and instead of giving it back to all taxpayers, you can instead funnel it just to certain spots, the people getting that money are happy about it. And they have a lot of power down there. The other thing politically is that you've got people who run as free market oriented people. They talk about tax cuts and they talk about tax credits in the same sentence as if they're the same thing. Tax credits are not tax cuts. Tax credits are essentially government spending by disguise, right? Instead of the government spending the money directly, they spend it through the tax code, but it's the exact same math when you write it down. So I think if we got out there and explained to people, do you want your own money back in a way that you can control it and you can invest it and businesses across the country can pop up and stay and retain workers? Or do you want Jefferson City and all their great wisdom to decide who gets the benefits? You can kind of pick. And I think I know which one I prefer.
I'll never forget meeting you, and we were on the transition team for Governor Greitens, and having you to come. I ran to find you to explain to someone else who was, new to Missouri that, no, the Department of Economic Development's budget is this, but that doesn't mean that that's how much money they're controlling because of that very thing, because of the tax credits. Like, they're handing out, I don't know how much money they're handing out in tax credits. So whoever's in charge of that position is a really big deal. But it shouldn't be. Like, we shouldn't be like picking and choosing the winners and losers and like making everyone else basically the loser here because the state is not improving and it's not growing like other states that do have those tax corridors that you were describing, Tennessee, Florida, Texas. You don't have the young people wanting to move there. We lose our talented people. They don't move back. And then the other thing I think affects it is crime. And I'm a criminal defense attorney, I know, but if you're looking up stories of where to live, right now on the homepage of the Wall Street Journal is a thing about the disastrous St. Louis city real estate market. I mean, that is not an attractive thing for potential employers to look at and decide to try to recruit people to move to a place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in some sense, it's not rocket science to think about why people want to go to certain places. And there's certain factors that you can't control, like, people want mountains or beaches or whatever. Like, yes. That's that. But then there's things we can control. And families want to go to places where there's going to be good schools, they're going to be safe, they're going to be good jobs. And, sometimes the ordering of things can kind of be different. So, for example, if we had a real simple, low, and fair tax code, and when I say fair, I don't mean fair the way that progressive types talk about it. Fair means a level playing field, not level incomes. It means equality of opportunity, not equality of outcomes. And if you have something like that, then, first of all, that itself will cause some people to come. I mean, there's definitely people who've gone to Florida because of their tax code. But then it creates a virtuous cycle where then businesses want to go there because there's more people there. And then now that there's more businesses and more jobs, that also attracts people on its own. And you can kind of create a virtuous cycle, whereas crime goes in the exact opposite direction. Right? It makes everything get worse. That's a huge issue, particularly in St. Louis.
Aaron, what about the take of Joe Biden yesterday when they brought the numbers out? And he said basically that, inflation was surging when he took office in 2021. That's not the case, according to the numbers.
I mean, that's literally a lie. I mean, inflation was below. Inflation was below 2%. And you entered January 2021, inflation was below 2%. Inflation did not start rising until after they passed the multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bill, known, ironically, as the American Rescue Plan Act, only to be exceeded by more irony in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Well, Aaron Hedlund from the Show Me Institute, thank you for joining us. time for the morning bell. This is Jennifer Bukowski, not Stephanie Bell, but happy to sit in here for her and tell you that S&P futures are up slightly at 0.24%. It looks like the Dow futures are up slightly at 0.16%, so it's like things are pretty even right now. Gold's up almost 0.5%, silver up 0.37%, but copper's down, and the U.S. 10-year average is down as well. Speaking of copper, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, why is it always bad when Missouri is on the front page of these national publications, Hannah?
It's like you get excited because you see that your state made a big headline, and then you read the rest of it and you go, oh.
Yeah. The real estate nightmare unfolding in downtown St. Louis is the story.
Oh, downtown St. Louis. That tells me everything I need to know right there.
Yeah. The office district is empty with boarded up towers, copper thieves, and failing retail. Even the Panera outlet shut down. The city is desperately trying to reverse the doom loop. I worked there in the city of St. Louis, so I started out as an accountant. I don't often talk about that.
That's how you're so scrappy.
I worked downtown in St. Louis, and so then I worked again after law school or during law school for a big law firm in downtown St. Louis. In those days, a lot of in I guess 05, 04, there were still a lot of accounting firms and law firms in downtown St. Louis, but they've all left. They've all gone to Clayton. Almost none of them. I'm not aware of a big one that's still in downtown St. Louis.
And can you blame them?
I can't because, as these places have left, there's less places open for lunch. There's crime. There's people breaking into cars. And you have to go blocks and blocks and blocks to find something that's even open for a service. And it's like a ghost town now.
Yeah, the law firms, I think, that are still left in downtown St. Louis, correct me if I'm wrong, are those ones that do the vast majority of their work in the federal courthouse.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And this is also being seen in Kansas City with a lot of people moving, unfortunately, in that situation to Kansas. But the AT&T Tower, this blows my mind. It's the biggest skyscraper in St. Louis. I think it said the price for the AT&T Tower 3 blocks away from the Railway Exchange, which this article was talking about, where the famous bar was, and then it was Macy's, and you could get this famous French onion soup there. That is a boarded up building 3 blocks away, AT&T Tower. In 2006, it sold for $205 million. In 2022, it changed hands for just $4 million. It said 3.5 in this article when I looked at it last night. But I know that $4 million sounds like a lot, or 3.5, but for a 44-story building in the heart of a big city, that's
crazy.
Like nothing.
That's a steal of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, the property taxes on that have got to be, well, I don't know. They can appeal that and change their value. Everyone, and Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Here we go. Columbia Public Schools have been, messaging parents, sending out messages, help, late check-ins / absences have us below state requirement of 80%. Please be sure your student is at school so they can learn. It's been 4 years since the pandemic, and it significantly affected attendance rates across the state, with CPS dropping from 84.7% in 2019 to 73.6% in 2023. So Missouri as a whole saw a 76.7 attendance in 2023, down from 87% in 2019. Why is this? It's because we said for years and years, this is how when I was growing up, this was the message. Education is the most important thing. You have to go to school. There's no excuse for missing it. Education is critical. It's so important. We hear this every year with the legislature. They're like, this is the most important thing. Kids are our future. Their education is everything. But what did we do when we had a pandemic? We decided to say, hey, kids, you don't need to go to school to protect the people with comorbidities and the older folks. We're going to just cancel school. Well, that sent the message that school isn't important anymore, didn't it? That's my theory. What are your thoughts? 573-874-9390. Text us or call us. Why are kids not coming to class anymore, especially the teenagers? I see it. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I know a lot of schools, like every time that a student is marked absent, they immediately call the parents, right? So I know that's not really a new thing. When I was in school, that was the thing. Like, as soon as we got marked absent, my mom would get a phone call saying, hey, just heads up, like, your kid was marked absent. And my mom always knew, of course, but the kids that tried to skip class would basically get called out right away. So in my mind, is it parents that aren't making it a priority to get their kids to school? Or is it, kids being hoodlums?
I wonder if, the pandemic had that kind of psychological impact on the parents as well, because now, so school isn't something that is so important that we have to make sure our kids go to, and our kids don't think they need to be there. So I've got this busy day. Am I going to fight with the kid about going to school? But it wasn't an option for me. Like, the idea that I could just not go to school was not something that my parents would ever be open to. But I think people are now more open to kids missing school, and it's going to hurt the bottom line for these schools where the amount of money they get is tied to their attendance numbers. And if they're falling below 80%, Michelle Baumstark is saying now that they've hit 80%. I think that has a financial impact on the schools. And so it's the reverberations from this, I think we're going to be seeing for decades to come with the reading levels, the math levels, and everything.
Yeah, we were talking about parents being criminally liable if you don't make sure your kid...
I wrote a law review article about that.
Isn't it a misdemeanor?
It's a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And there have been a few cases popping up, and there was a Missouri Supreme Court case decided on that earlier, I believe, this year, because it's kind of vague what counts as attendance, and they went with like whatever the district defines it as, which is like a 90%. And so then they can be prosecuted if they don't comply with whatever the district deems the attendance number needs to be. And so that was a legal question. I don't know if I agree with the court's reasoning in that case, because it is a little vague, in my opinion. But yeah, are we going to see more prosecution of parents? That's another situation like the shooting thing where you're being held responsible for the conduct of another because you have that special parent-child relationship. And I see the one and only Brian Hauswirth is in studio. Do you have some news for us? Let me hit the button here.
Very, very good, Counselor. I appreciate it. I think the one thing that's probably worth mentioning, and it's nothing controversial, but I think it's good to have something positive because we've had a lot of negative stories. But I covered yesterday the Ready board meeting, as you know, and I missed a court hearing because I was there, but I thought the Ready thing, and it was bigger, and it was. And Nim Chennai, I didn't know he was going to present. He presented a detailed report about MU healthcare and a lot about hospital closings around the state. It was very detailed. But the biggest thing he said was a presentation about the Children's Hospital, $200 million. We had the radiothon just a couple of months ago on the Eagle and KWS. And he says they're going to open that in phases, $232 million, fully operational by June. He says the Ronald McDonald House will have a family room in there. So a lot of really good information. But today the Board of Curators will go over and tour that as well. Dr. Choi and a lot of folks will be there. So I thought that was significant. And the one other thing I should mention, John Martin, who you know is running for Missouri House of Representatives, he was at the meeting. He asked a very good question I think a lot of people want to know, and what is going to happen to Women's Hospital? And the response from President or from the Vice Chancellor Chania was no definitive plans, but they're going to continue to do outpatient surgeries there. So a couple, I thought, important things that we at least learned from that and worth noting. And I'll have a story up on that on the web here shortly.
Good. My brother's an emergency room doctor for the university, and sometimes he has to do shifts over at the Women's and Children's Hospital. And even though it says women and children right on there, you'll get people dropping off shooting victims and everything else over there. But they're not set up with like the level 5 or whatever it is trauma center at that one.
That's right.
They really need to go over to the main university hospital. But yep, he deals with that all the time. And I wonder if they'll still have an emergency room because that or not.
That did not come up. I would hope so. I've
heard that they won't. But I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, and it's a great question you're asking because you are, and I've heard it so many times, Counselor, on the scanner, gunshot victims, they're dropped off by family, in some cases literally dumped out of the car.
Yeah.
They just dump them out of the car or they drop them off and they're dumped there at the Women and Children's Hospital as opposed to taking them to Boone or whatever, where at least they get some medical treatment, but that has happened several times I've heard on the scanner.
Yeah.
It really has.
Yeah, he says it happens frequently.
Have a great rest of your show, my friend.
Thank you. Other stories, so much popping up in the news. It has been a little doom and gloom. I am baking a cake later, and I got a hot tip from Roger on the text messages of a recipe I should check out. Thank you for that. He recommends Paula Deen's recipe. I'm a pioneer woman. I love her stuff, but I'm definitely open to Paula Deen. I think she knows how to bake some cakes.
Well, and you're not just making any cake, you're making a carrot cake.
Yeah, I've never made one before. It's a request. My younger son, this is a new request that he wants, so I'm going to try to knock that out. I've got a little pickleball going to happen. I got a big cake. I got to file something in my case. I got a busy day ahead. I'm sure everyone else is listening, has some busy days as you're running around. What is your favorite birthday cake? I'd like to know. I wonder, chocolate? It's got to be chocolate. It's got to be the most popular birthday cake favorite, right?
Got to rank right up there, doesn't it?
That's my favorite with white icing.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm red velvet, which is essentially
chocolate with
a chocolate cake.
John, how about you?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a chocolate guy.
Yeah.
Just red velvet with cream cheese icing. It is hard to beat that.
My least favorite cake, fruit cake.
Yeah.
One time we were at Thanksgiving. What did they come out with? It looks like a delicious chocolate pie with nuts on it. It was a fruitcake. I'm like, you're a fruitcake if you think that this is an appropriate dessert at an American freaking Thanksgiving meal. But I didn't put it that way. I didn't say that out loud, just in my head.
We had a kind of a neat crime story, Jen, down in Versailles, that somebody used a stolen pickup, hooked a chain to it, and tore the front door off an ATM.
Wow.
Took the money out of the ATM, ditched the pickup, and the suspects were spotted on video heading south on Highway 5 at Versailles in a black getaway car. And now officials are saying there's apparently a theft ring based in Texas that's hitting Missouri and doing the same kind of thing, stealing big trucks, getting a log chain and tearing the ATMs apart and taking off with them.
Wow.
Not very low profile way of robbing it.
Well, that's like they had a plan of exactly how to get in, and they successfully got the money. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And apparently it's not an isolated deal in Missouri. Apparently they think it's the work of one theft ring.
Well, a lot of ATMs I'm starting to see, they have warning labels on them, and I cannot remember the exact verbiage that they have on there, but it's a warning label basically saying this ATM is anchored in the ground or something, so that, trying to drag the front of it off with your car isn't going to work out very well. Apparently,
well, if it's just the front
yeah.
of the ATM, it could rip that panel off potentially, even if it is anchored in.
Yeah, I just have a hard time, imagining that was very quiet and that they wouldn't have been busted, pretty quickly. But if they're in a sting operation and they're pros at this, maybe they're pretty quick at it.
Sound like they had it down to a science, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, Black Forest cake with real cherry liquor. That's Rebecca's favorite cake. She's texting in.
Liquor and cake at the same time, I'm in.
If it bakes, though, I think the alcohol gets cooked off. So it shouldn't trigger, if you've got one of those ankle bracelets, it shouldn't technically trigger, though it's possible.
Thanks for looking out for me and my ankle bracelet, Jen.
Yeah. It's a cute accessory you got over there, Anna. Matches mine, right?
Yeah.
How's yours doing, John? You got a hot pink one?
My ankle bracelet keeps beeping for some reason. I guess I'm getting too far away from the receiver.
Oh, no. All right. I used to be on that lineup. I don't know if I was just not thoughtful enough or whatever.
Oh, man.
Now I'm on Tuesdays at 10:30, so catch me there. But in the meantime, John Marsh down in our Jeff City studio has some guests with some information to relay to us about a tournament. John?
Yeah, Jen, we've got Angela Hershen with us from her Rape and Abuse Crisis Service in Jefferson City. Does a lot of neat work with domestic violence victims, moms and kids and even pets at times. Angela, talk to us about first the agency, and then we're going to talk about the golf tournament a little bit.
Sure. Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. So the Rape and Abuse Crisis Service, we have been in business, if you would, since 1980. We're based here in Jefferson City. We serve 9 counties in central Missouri. It's a little over 5,000 square miles that we work in. We serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And like you mentioned, John, women and children and men as well. We work with survivors who need advocacy services, counseling services, case management services. We have a 24-hour hotline that anyone can call anytime just to get information if they're looking for how to talk to a friend or a family member or get them help, or if they themselves are in a situation that's dangerous, what steps can they take to develop a safety plan or to leave that relationship. What we're probably most known for is our shelter. And although that is what we're most known for, that's probably the smallest part of what we do. About 60 to 70% of our services take place outside of the shelter. So we have spent the last 3 years really increasing our outreach services because I want to make sure that people are able to access the support that they need where they are and not necessarily have to come to Jefferson City to see a counselor or to work with an advocate or to have a support system if they're going to civil or criminal court, for example. So we work with survivors throughout central Missouri. Last year, we worked with 1,313 survivors with more than 18,000 different services. And that is a 41% increase from 2022. Wow. So we are seeing the number of survivors coming forward and looking for services dramatically increasing year after year. I don't want to say that's because we're seeing domestic violence incidents increase or getting worse. But Missouri is third in the nation for the number of domestic violence incidents that occur. And that's not a top 10 we want to be on.
Talk to us about your fundraiser coming up. That's a big deal doing these services for RACs. They don't come cheap.
They do not come cheap. And so we are holding our first fundraiser of 2024. It is a golf tournament. It's the Driving Out Domestic Violence Golf Tournament. It's going to be held a week from Monday, April 22nd at the Jefferson City Country Club. We do still have a few spots available for teams of 4 if people would like to register and play in that tournament. It's a great opportunity to come out. It's going to be a beautiful spring day, have an opportunity to play the country club course and support a great cause. And if people would like to register or find more information about the tournament or about RACs in general, they can visit our website at racsjc.org.
I was relating to you my story I often tell about RACs, and it may date me a little bit, but we were touring the current shelter when it was brand new. I was there with Lincoln University President Dr. Wendell Rayburn, who was down on his hands and knees playing with one of the little kids there, and said to the little kid, I'm paraphrasing, he said something to the effect of, "What do you think of this place?" And the little kid said, "It makes me feel safe."
Absolutely.
I still remember
that. Makes my
that.
heart happy. Yes. That is what we are all about. We are a safe place to stay when it's not safe to stay at home. And we do that through the support of the community. And we can't do what we do without that support. And this fundraiser, this golf tournament, is just an opportunity for the community to show their support and help us do what we do, and that is to keep families safe.
One more time, when and where, and how can folks get more information on the RACs Golf Tournament?
Tournament is April 22nd, a week from Monday at the Jefferson City Country Club. Registration begins at 11, lunch is at noon, and the tee-off is at 1. And to register, go to racsjc.org.
Angela Hurston with us from the Rape and Abuse Crisis Service in Jefferson City. We'll have a great golf tournament. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Jen, Think Tank Thursday, looming large with Gary Nolan. And I don't know, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. Gary's always got a spicy lineup for Think Tank Thursday. Well, some of them are wonky, but some of them are fun. And it's always a good day to tune into the Gary Nolan Show for sure. And also, remember, the Best of Columbia voting is open. Do you like Las Margaritas, Lakota Coffee, Creekside Pet Center? Vote on your favorite restaurants, lawyers, everything.
Radio show.
Producer Hannah.
Producer